In 1985, three men walked into a Chicago armored car depot and vanished with over $2 million in less than 12 minutes. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no second chances. The case went cold faster than anyone expected, and the money disappeared into the maze of a city that knew how to keep secrets. For nearly 4 decades, investigators had nothing but empty leads and dead ends, but sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. In 2023, during the digitization of old entertainment industry archives, a single photograph surfaced that would crack open one of Chicago's most perfectly executed heists. What started as a routine cataloging project became the key to unraveling a crime that had stumped federal agents for 38 years. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. On the morning of March 14, 1985, the Midwest Security Transport Facility on Chicago's South Side operated like clockwork. The building, a converted warehouse surrounded by chain link and razor wire, served as a regional hub for cash transfers between banks and Federal Reserve branches across Illinois. Every Tuesday and Thursday, armored trucks would arrive carrying sealed containers of currency from dozens of financial institutions. The money would be sorted, counted, and prepared for redistribution according to federal banking protocols. The facility employed 18 people across 2 shifts. The morning crew handled incoming shipments while the afternoon team managed outbound transfers. Security was tight but not impenetrable. 2 armed guards monitored the loading dock. Cameras covered the main corridors, and access required both keycards and numeric codes. The system had worked without incident for over 7 years. Marcus Webb had been the loading supervisor for 3 of those years. At 31, he was reliable, punctual, and trusted with high-value transfers. His background check had been thorough, his references solid, and his work performance consistently rated above average. He lived modestly in a South Side apartment, drove a used sedan, and maintained no obvious connections to criminal networks. To his colleagues, Webb was exactly what he appeared to be, a steady employee doing an honest job. That Tuesday morning began like any other. The first armored truck arrived at 7:20 a.m. carrying deposits from 12 suburban banks. Webb supervised the unloading while his team processed the incoming containers. The routine was familiar, each step documented and verified. By 9:15 a.m., over $2.1 million in mixed denominations had been logged into the facility's inventory system. The cash was secured in the main vault, awaiting afternoon transfer to the Federal Reserve Building downtown. At 9:47 a.m., Webb approached the security checkpoint and informed the duty officer that he needed to step outside for a smoke break. This wasn't unusual. Employees frequently took short breaks during slower periods, and Webb had made similar requests dozens of times before. The guard noted the time and buzzed him through the exit door. Webb walked casually toward the employee parking area, cigarette pack visible in his hand. What happened next unfolded with surgical precision. 2 men emerged from behind a delivery truck parked near the facility's rear entrance. Both wore dark coveralls and carried canvas bags. They moved without hesitation toward the same exit door Webb had just used. The loading dock's external camera captured their approach, but the angle obscured their faces. They appeared to be maintenance workers or delivery personnel. Nothing that would trigger immediate alarm. Webb had left the exit door slightly ajar, a violation of protocol that went unnoticed by the internal security system. The 2 men slipped inside without triggering any alerts. They knew exactly where to go. The facility's layout was complex, with multiple corridors and restricted areas, but they navigated directly toward the main vault. Their movement suggested intimate familiarity with the building's design. Inside the vault area, the morning's cash shipments were organized in metal containers, each labeled with bank codes and transfer destinations. The men worked quickly, selecting specific containers while ignoring others. They weren't taking everything randomly. They targeted the highest value shipments, those containing large bills and certified deposits. Within minutes, they had filled their bags with over $2 million in currency. The entire operation lasted 11 minutes and 37 seconds. The men exited through the same door they had entered, walking calmly toward the waiting delivery truck. The vehicle was a generic white panel van with no distinguishing markings. By the time facility alarms were triggered, the van had already disappeared into Chicago's dense network of industrial streets. Webb returned from his smoke break at 10:02 a.m., 15 minutes after he had left. He swiped his keycard and re-entered the building normally. When questioned later, he claimed to have lost track of time while making a personal phone call. His explanation seemed plausible, and his demeanor showed no signs of stress or deception. The timing appeared coincidental rather than coordinated. The theft wasn't discovered until 11:30 a.m., when a routine inventory check revealed the missing containers. By then, the trail had gone completely cold. The delivery van was found abandoned in an industrial parking lot 6 miles away, stripped clean and wiped of fingerprints. The coveralls were discovered in a nearby dumpster, along with the empty canvas bags. No DNA evidence remained, no witnesses came forward, and no surveillance footage provided clear facial identification. Federal investigators arrived within hours. The FBI's bank robbery division took primary jurisdiction, given the interstate nature of the facility's operations. They interviewed every employee, examined security protocols, and analyzed the facility's access logs. The precision of the operation suggested inside knowledge, but proving complicity was another matter entirely. Webb underwent extensive questioning. His financial records were scrutinized, his associates investigated, and his daily routines mapped in detail. Nothing connected him directly to the crime. His bank account showed no unusual deposits, his lifestyle remained unchanged, and his behavior at work continued normally. If he was involved, he had covered his tracks with remarkable discipline. The investigation expanded to include known associates of professional robbery crews operating in the Chicago area. Dozens of suspects were questioned, but none had verifiable connections to the facility or its employees. The theft appeared to be the work of a new crew, one that had planned meticulously and executed flawlessly. Physical evidence was minimal. The abandoned van had been purchased with cash 3 weeks earlier, using false identification. The coveralls were generic work clothing available at any hardware store. The canvas bags were standard military surplus items with no traceable origins. Even the route taken by the getaway vehicle had been carefully planned to avoid major intersections with traffic cameras. As weeks turned into months, the case began to stagnate. Despite the substantial reward offered and extensive media coverage, no credible tips materialized. The stolen currency, identifiable by serial numbers, never surfaced in banking systems or criminal enterprises. The perpetrators had either destroyed the money, which seemed unlikely, or had found ways to launder it that avoided federal detection. Webb remained employed at the facility for another 8 months before accepting a transfer to a different security company. His departure was voluntary and coincided with a general restructuring of personnel following the robbery. He relocated to Milwaukee, where he worked in similar capacity for a transportation firm. His new employers were aware of his connection to the Chicago incident but found no grounds for concern in his background check. The case file grew thick with reports, interviews, and forensic analyses, but the core mystery remained unsolved. 3 men had walked away with over $2 million, leaving behind no meaningful clues about their identities or whereabouts. The FBI classified the investigation as active but acknowledged privately that, without new evidence or witnesses, prosecution was unlikely. By 1987, the Chicago armored car heist had joined the ranks of the city's most notorious unsolved crimes. The money was gone, the perpetrators had vanished, and the trail had gone completely cold. What no one anticipated was that decades later, a single photograph from an entirely different world would provide the break investigators had been waiting for. The entertainment industry has always been a world of transient connections and forgotten faces. In the 1980s, before digital photography and social media created permanent records of every moment, countless performers moved through Chicago's vibrant music and dance scene without leaving lasting traces. Backup dancers, session musicians, and touring performers would appear for a few months, maybe a year, then disappear into other cities or careers entirely. Their contributions were rarely documented, their names seldom recorded, and their faces captured only in the occasional promotional photograph or behind-the-scenes snapshot. This was the world that 38-year-old archivist Jennifer Chen encountered when she began digitizing materials for the Chicago Entertainment Heritage Project in early 2023. The initiative, funded by a combination of city grants and private donations, aimed to preserve the rich musical history of Chicago's south and west sides. Boxes of photographs, flyers, and promotional materials had been donated by retired club owners, former record label executives, and families of deceased performers. Most items were unlabeled, undated, and unorganized. Chen worked methodically through the collection, scanning each photograph at high resolution and attempting to identify performers, venues, and approximate dates. The work was painstaking but rewarding. She uncovered images of legendary blues musicians in their prime, documented the early careers of artists who would later achieve national fame, and preserved moments from Chicago's underground music scene that might otherwise have been lost forever. Among the thousands of photographs was a collection donated by the estate of Raymond Big Ray Johnson, a club owner who had operated several venues on the South Side from the late 1970s through the early 1990s. Johnson's clubs had been known for featuring both established acts and emerging talent, creating a vibrant mix of musical styles and attracting diverse audiences. His photograph collection reflected this eclectic approach, containing images of everything from jazz ensembles to hip-hop acts to R&B reviews. One particular photograph caught Chen's attention during her work in March 2023. The image showed a group of backup dancers posing behind a female vocalist on what appeared to be a small club stage. The lighting was typical of the era, harsh and direct, creating sharp shadows and highlighting the performers' costumes. The setting suggested a promotional shoot or perhaps documentation of a particular show. The photograph was slightly out of focus, the kind of image that might normally be discarded or overlooked. What made Chen pause was not the artistic quality of the photograph, but rather one of the male dancers visible in the background. Something about his facial structure seemed familiar, though she couldn't immediately place where she might have seen him before. The man appeared to be in his late 20s or early 30s, with distinctive cheekbones and a particular way of holding his head slightly tilted to one side. His expression was serious, professional, the look of someone focused on his craft. Chen made a note to research the photograph further and continued with her work. But the face lingered in her mind throughout the day. That evening, while reviewing the day's digitized images, she found herself returning repeatedly to the same photograph. The dancer's features seemed to trigger a memory she couldn't quite access, a sense of recognition that remained frustratingly vague. The breakthrough came 3 days later during a conversation with her colleague David Martinez, who worked part-time for the Heritage Project while pursuing graduate studies in criminal justice. Martinez had been helping Chen identify photographs by cross-referencing them with newspaper archives and police records from the period. His academic research focused on unsolved crimes from the 1980s, particularly cases involving organized theft and robbery. When Chen mentioned her puzzling sense of recognition about the dancer in the photograph, Martinez suggested a different approach. Instead of trying to identify the man through entertainment industry records, he proposed running the image through facial recognition software used by law enforcement agencies. The technology had advanced significantly in recent years, capable of matching faces across decades, despite changes in age, weight, and appearance. Martinez had access to such software through his graduate research, which involved analyzing cold case files for patterns and connections that earlier investigators might have missed. With Chen's permission, he uploaded the cropped image of the dancer and initiated a search through criminal databases maintained by Chicago police and federal agencies. The match came back within hours, and it was far from what either of them had expected. The facial recognition system identified the dancer with 87% confidence as Marcus Webb, the former loading supervisor at Midwest Security Transport who had been present during the 1985 armored car robbery. The software had compared the photograph against Webb's employment records, driver's license photos, and investigative files from the original case. Martinez immediately contacted the FBI's Chicago field office, specifically reaching out to Agent Sarah Kellerman, who had recently taken over several cold cases from retiring investigators. Kellerman had inherited the armored car robbery file and had been reviewing it as part of a broader initiative to apply new technologies to unsolved crimes from previous decades. When Martinez explained the circumstances of the discovery, Kellerman was initially skeptical. Facial recognition technology, while increasingly sophisticated, was not infallible. False positives were common, particularly when comparing images taken decades apart under different lighting conditions. However, the potential connection was significant enough to warrant investigation. Kellerman requested copies of both the newly discovered photograph and the original investigative files related to Marcus Webb. Her review revealed several details that had been overlooked or inadequately explored during the original investigation. Webb's employment at the facility had ended 8 months after the robbery, ostensibly for voluntary reasons. His relocation to Milwaukee had been documented but not thoroughly investigated. Most importantly, his activities during the period immediately following the heist had never been comprehensively mapped. The photograph presented a new angle for investigation. If Webb had indeed been performing as a backup dancer in Chicago clubs during the mid-1980s, it suggested a lifestyle and social circle that differed significantly from the modest, low-key existence described in the original case files. Backup dancing, particularly in the club scene, often involved late nights, irregular schedules, and connections to a diverse range of performers and venues. It was exactly the kind of environment where someone might make contacts outside legitimate employment circles. Kellerman began by attempting to verify the photograph's authenticity and dating. The paper stock, printing process, and photographic techniques all appeared consistent with mid-1980s commercial photography. The clothing and hairstyles visible in the image supported this time frame. More importantly, the venue appeared to match promotional materials from clubs known to have operated on Chicago's South Side during that period. The next step involved tracking down other individuals who might have been present when the photograph was taken. This proved challenging, as the entertainment industry's informal nature meant that many connections had been lost over the intervening decades. However, Kellerman's team was able to identify the female vocalist in the center of the image through comparison with archived promotional materials. The woman, now in her 70s and living in Detroit, agreed to be interviewed about her memories of performing in Chicago during the 1980s. Her recollections were fragmentary but revealing. She remembered working with several backup dancers during her Chicago engagements, though she couldn't recall specific names. However, she did remember one dancer who had seemed different from the others, more reserved and less interested in the social aspects of the entertainment world. This individual had been reliable and professional, but had maintained distance from the typical after-show gatherings and industry networking that characterized the scene. The description aligned with Webb's personality as documented in the original investigation. Colleagues at the security facility had consistently described him as competent, but not particularly social, someone who kept to himself and rarely participated in workplace conversations beyond professional necessities. As Kellerman's investigation progressed, she uncovered additional evidence that Webb's life during the mid-1980s had been more complex than originally understood. Bank records, subpoenaed as part of the renewed investigation, showed irregular deposit patterns that could have been consistent with freelance entertainment work. The amounts were small and infrequent, exactly what might be expected from occasional backup dancing gigs. More significantly, the investigation revealed that Webb had maintained connections to the entertainment scene even after the robbery. Phone records from 1986 and 1987 showed calls to numbers associated with talent agencies and club booking offices. These contacts had continued even after his relocation to Milwaukee, suggesting that his involvement in entertainment had been more than casual. The photograph had opened a window into a hidden aspect of Webb's life, one that provided new context for understanding his potential role in the armored car heist. If he had been actively involved in Chicago's club scene, he would have encountered individuals from various backgrounds, including some who might have been connected to criminal enterprises. The entertainment world, particularly at the club level, often intersected with less legitimate activities. Kellerman's team began mapping Webb's movements during the crucial months following the March 1985 robbery. What they discovered painted a picture far more intricate than the original investigators had uncovered. Webb hadn't simply continued his routine life after the heist. Instead, he had gradually but systematically altered his patterns, his associations, and his financial behavior in ways that suggested careful planning rather than coincidence. The entertainment connections provided a perfect cover story. Backup dancing was inherently irregular work, paid in cash, and rarely documented with formal contracts or tax records. If Webb had been laundering stolen money through this network, the informal nature of the industry would have made detection nearly impossible using 1980s investigative techniques. Small cash payments for dance performances could easily mask larger sums being moved through the system. Agent Kellerman requested a full financial audit of Webb's activities from March 1985 through his departure to Milwaukee in late 1985. What emerged was a pattern of cash deposits that exceeded what his security job salary could account for. The amounts weren't dramatic, nothing that would have triggered immediate suspicion, but they were consistent and unexplained. When combined with his documented presence in Chicago's club scene, the deposits began to look less like supplemental income and more like systematic money laundering. The investigation took on new urgency when Kellerman's team discovered that Webb's connection to the entertainment world hadn't ended with his move to Milwaukee. Phone records showed continued contact with Chicago-based talent agents and club owners throughout 1986 and into 1987. These weren't casual conversations. The calls were lengthy, frequent, and often made during business hours when Webb should have been at his legitimate job. More significantly, the team uncovered evidence that Webb had made several trips back to Chicago during his first year in Milwaukee, trips that weren't documented in his employment records or explained by any known personal obligations. Hotel receipts, obtained through a painstaking review of archived credit card statements, showed overnight stays in downtown Chicago on at least 6 occasions between January and August 1986. The timing of these visits aligned with major club events and music industry gatherings documented in contemporary newspapers and trade publications. Webb wasn't just maintaining loose connections to his former entertainment associates. He was actively participating in the Chicago club scene, despite having relocated to another city and supposedly started a new life. This discovery prompted Kellerman to expand her investigation beyond Webb himself. If he had been involved in the armored car robbery, he hadn't acted alone. The precision of the operation and the clean escape suggested a team with complementary skills and inside knowledge. Webb's entertainment connections might provide leads to his potential accomplices. The team began cross-referencing the names of performers, club owners, and talent agents in Webb's phone records against criminal databases and known associates of robbery crews active in the Chicago area during the mid-1980s. The process was tedious, complicated by the informal nature of entertainment industry record-keeping and the passage of nearly 4 decades. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered that one of Webb's frequent contacts, a talent agent named Vincent Caruso, had connections that extended far beyond legitimate entertainment business. Caruso's client roster included not only dancers and musicians but also individuals with criminal records for theft, fraud, and organized crime activities. His agency served as a front for more questionable enterprises, providing cover stories and alibis for people who needed to explain irregular income or unusual schedules. Caruso had died in 1998, taking his secrets with him, but his business records had been preserved in a storage facility following a bankruptcy proceeding. Kellerman obtained a warrant to examine these files, hoping to find documentation of Webb's involvement with the agency and possibly evidence of the money laundering operation. The records revealed that Webb had been listed as a client of Caruso's agency from April 1985 through September 1987, a period that began just weeks after the armored car robbery. His file contained performance schedules, payment records, and promotional photographs, including several that matched the image discovered in the Heritage Project archives. More importantly, the file contained notations about special arrangements and cash-only payments that differed from standard industry practices. Webb's client file also contained references to 2 other individuals who had been added to the agency roster around the same time. The names meant nothing to Kellerman initially, but when she ran them through criminal databases, both returned hits for individuals with backgrounds in armed robbery and theft. Neither had been questioned during the original investigation of the armored car heist, but their connection to Webb through Caruso's agency created a new line of inquiry. The first name, Robert Chen, matched records for a man who had been arrested in Detroit in 1987 for attempting to fence stolen jewelry. The charges had been dropped due to insufficient evidence, but the arrest report described Chen as part of a crew suspected of multiple high-value thefts across the Midwest. His physical description matched witness accounts of one of the men seen near the Midwest security facility on the morning of the robbery. The second name, Anthony Russo, belonged to a former security guard who had been fired from 3 different positions between 1982 and 1984 for unexplained absences and suspicious behavior. Russo had worked briefly for a company that provided services to several financial institutions in the Chicago area, giving him potential access to information about money transport schedules and security procedures. Both men had disappeared from official records around the same time Webb relocated to Milwaukee. Chen's last known address was abandoned in late 1985, and Russo had failed to report for parole meetings in early 1986. Their simultaneous vanishing act, combined with their connections to Webb through Caruso's agency, suggested a coordinated effort to distance themselves from Chicago following the successful robbery. Kellerman's team began tracking the post-robbery activities of all 3 men. The investigation revealed that while they had separated geographically, they had maintained financial connections through a network of shell companies and intermediary accounts that hadn't existed during the original investigation. The money laundering operation was far more sophisticated than anyone had suspected in 1985. Bank records, obtained through federal subpoenas, showed a complex web of transfers between accounts in Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, and Miami. The amounts involved were substantial but structured to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements. Money would flow from legitimate businesses to entertainment industry accounts, then to personal accounts, and finally to investment vehicles that obscured the original source of the funds. The entertainment industry connections weren't just cover stories. They were integral to the laundering operation. Club owners, talent agents, and even some legitimate performers had been unknowingly recruited to provide invoices, contracts, and documentation that justified large cash movements. The stolen money had been cleaned through a network of seemingly legitimate transactions that would have been nearly impossible to trace without modern financial analysis tools. As the investigation progressed, Kellerman realized that the 1985 armored car robbery had been far more than a simple theft. It was the foundation of an ongoing criminal enterprise that had operated successfully for years, possibly decades. The three suspects hadn't just stolen money and disappeared. They had used their success to build a sophisticated network for laundering stolen funds from multiple sources. The discovery of Webb's photograph in the entertainment archives had opened a door to understanding how one of Chicago's most notorious unsolved crimes had actually been the beginning of something much larger. What appeared to be a perfect heist with no loose ends had actually left a trail of evidence hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right combination of technology and persistence to bring it to light. The investigation was far from over, but for the first time in 38 years, federal agents had concrete leads, financial evidence, and a clear understanding of how the crime had been executed and concealed. The backup dancer in the forgotten photograph had become the key to unraveling not just one robbery, but an entire criminal network that had operated in the shadows of Chicago's entertainment industry for decades. By October 2023, Agent Kellerman's investigation had evolved from examining a single cold case to dismantling what appeared to be a decades-long criminal operation. The photograph of Marcus Webb performing as a backup dancer had revealed connections that stretched across multiple states and involved dozens of individuals who had unknowingly participated in one of the most sophisticated money laundering schemes the FBI had encountered from that era. The breakthrough came when financial analysts working with Kellerman's team discovered that the network established after the 1985 robbery had continued operating long after the original stolen funds should have been exhausted. Bank records showed ongoing activity through shell companies and entertainment industry fronts well into the 1990s, suggesting that the armored car heist had been just the beginning of the crew's criminal activities. Webb's trail led investigators to a storage unit in Milwaukee that had been rented continuously since 1986 under the name of a defunct talent agency. When federal agents obtained a warrant to search the facility, they discovered boxes of documents, financial records, and photographs that provided a comprehensive view of the laundering operation. Among the materials were detailed ledgers showing how stolen money had been moved through the entertainment industry network, complete with fake invoices, forged contracts, and documentation of payments to performers who had no knowledge they were participating in a criminal scheme. The ledgers revealed that Webb, Chen, and Russo had expanded their operation beyond the original robbery proceeds. They had used their successful laundering system to clean money from other thefts, fraudulent schemes, and even legitimate businesses that wanted to avoid tax obligations. The entertainment industry connections provided perfect cover for moving large amounts of cash without triggering federal oversight. Most significantly, the storage unit contained current addresses and contact information for both Webb and Chen Russo had died in a car accident in Florida in 1994, but his two former partners were still alive and had maintained their connection to the original network. Webb was living in Phoenix under his real name, working as a security consultant for private businesses. Chen had settled in Las Vegas, where he operated a small entertainment booking agency that investigators suspected was still being used for money laundering activities. Federal agents coordinated simultaneous arrests in both cities on November 15, 2023. Webb was taken into custody at his Phoenix home without incident. Chen attempted to flee when agents approached his Las Vegas office, but was apprehended at the airport before boarding a flight to Mexico. Both men were charged with conspiracy, money laundering, and theft of federal funds related to the 1985 armored car robbery. During questioning, Webb maintained his innocence for several hours before his attorney advised him of the overwhelming evidence against him. The combination of financial records, the entertainment industry documentation, and the decades-long paper trail made denial impossible. He eventually agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Webb's confession filled in the remaining details of the robbery and its aftermath. He confirmed that he had provided inside information about the facility's security procedures and schedules. The two men who had entered the building were indeed Chen and Russo, both of whom he had met through Chicago's club scene months before the robbery. The operation had been planned for over 6 months, with Webb using his entertainment industry connections to identify individuals who could help launder the stolen money. The confession also revealed that the crew had committed at least 4 other major thefts between 1986 and 1992, using the same network to clean the proceeds. The total amount of money involved exceeded $8 million, making it one of the largest criminal enterprises to operate in the Chicago area during that period. Chen, faced with similar evidence, also agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. His testimony provided details about the ongoing laundering operation and identified other individuals who had knowingly participated in the scheme. Several club owners, talent agents, and business operators were subsequently charged with related crimes. The case concluded in February 2024, with Webb receiving a 12-year federal prison sentence and Chen receiving 10 years. Both men were also ordered to pay restitution totaling over $3 million, representing the recovered proceeds and interest from their criminal activities. The investigation's success was attributed to the combination of new technology, persistent detective work, and the unexpected discovery of a single photograph in an entertainment industry archive. Agent Kellerman noted that without the Heritage Project's digitization effort and the facial recognition match, the case would likely have remained unsolved indefinitely. For Jennifer Chen, the archivist whose recognition of a familiar face had triggered the investigation, the outcome validated the importance of preserving historical materials that might seem insignificant at first glance. The photograph that had puzzled her during routine digitization work had ultimately provided justice for a crime that had eluded investigators for nearly 4 decades. The Chicago armored car robbery of 1985 officially closed as a solved case, but its resolution opened new questions about how many other cold cases might contain similar hidden connections waiting to be discovered. The entertainment industry archives that had yielded this breakthrough were just one of dozens of similar collections being digitized across the country, each containing thousands of photographs and documents that might hold keys to other unsolved mysteries. What began with 3 men walking away with over $2 million in stolen cash had ended with a comprehensive understanding of how they had hidden in plain sight for decades, using the very industry that celebrates performance and illusion to mask their real identities and criminal enterprise. The backup dancer's photograph had become the final piece of evidence needed to close the book on one of Chicago's most notorious unsolved crimes.